What's new, pussycat? Hey, ladies and gentlemen.
Whoa.
This is Scott Ott with Stephen Green and Bill Whittle. This is your Backstage episode. Before we come on camera here, we are talking about all kinds of things, but a lot of times it's music, and it's the kind of music that I think that stirs the soul. For example,
did you say stirs the soul or disturbs the soul?
I think it does
sure, absolutely, Bill.
So we covered, what did we do? We did Rod Stewart.
We did Tom Jones, the Vapors.
What was the Meat Puppets, or the one you were talking about? The Vapors?
The Vapors, yeah, turning Japanese.
We did
the Smiths.
We did golly, what's his name? Rick Moranis version of Turning Japanese, which is Turning Japanese. I think I'm turning Japanese. I really think so.
So I don't know why that led me to Tom Jones, other than perhaps because Tom Jones has probably done a song with every one of those other artists at some point.
All roads lead to Tom Jones.
There's only really 2 degrees of separation from Tom Jones at any given time.
Usually involving someone's panties.
Ew. That was a thing, by the way.
I know.
Could you do that today? But my grandmother loved Tom Jones, and my grandfather finally was able to scrape together the money and find childcare so that the 4 grandchildren he was caring for could have an irresponsible babysitter for the evening. And they went out and they saw Tom Jones in concert. Nice. And he said that they were still doing that at that time. And Jones was pretty old at that time. Like, women are throwing their underpants on the stage. And as a boy, I'm like, do they take their underpants off and throw them on the stage? Do they bring underpants with them to throw on the stage?
And it's a conundrum.
And my grandfather was joking. He's like, now, frankly, he said, Tom's audience is getting a little older. So Jones had to duck several times as really large undergarments.
Granny panties.
It's like a mast on a clipper coming down, I remember Mad Magazine, one cartoon, it's like a 1-frame cartoon, and it was like a headline that says Tom Jones outselling Engelbert Humperdinck 5-1, and it was a picture of 2 people at a ticket booth, and one guy says Engelbert Humperdinck, and the other guy goes Tom Jones, Tom Jones, Tom Jones, Tom Jones, Tom Jones. 5 people, or something like Engelbert Humperdinck.
Engelbert Humperdinck was great. The only song I can think of, though, is After the Lovin'. Is there another great song that he did?
Oh, boy. Hang on. Let me check the library here. There are a bunch of them.
Oh, yeah. Steve has 600 Engelbert Humperdinck songs saved.
But when I wanted to buy a Tom Jones Greatest Hits CD, this has got to be 20 years ago now, maybe longer. It was a 2-in-1 package. You had to get the Engelbert Humperdinck Greatest Hits CD with it. And so that's how I ended up with Engelbert.
Here's a 6-pack of Coke, including 1 Pepsi, which you must drink in order to get the Coke.
I love the in After the Lovin'. You could just picture the songwriter.
Is a decent song.
What is it?
What Now My Love by
What Now My Love.
Yeah.
But in After the Loving, I think there's a moment of songwriting despair in the middle of the song. All of a sudden, you can hear the songwriter cry out, "And I know that my song isn't saying anything new."
So are you saying that people have had enough of silly love songs?
Some people think this world has had enough of silly love songs.
This is never going to end.
No, it goes on forever. You could actually have a conversation for several hours where you did nothing but chain smoke lyrics, basically.
Yeah. But when I say pop references, I mean 30 or 40-year-old pop references.
Clearly.
Yeah, well,
clearly.
A little less pop than they are.
Grandpop references.
My wife said to me a couple of weeks ago that one of these nights we're going to sit on the sofa and have an entire evening's worth of conversations that is nothing but movie quotes that we both know.
That's
and
awesome.
We're this
close. You two could do that forever. Yeah. So I'm clearly stalling. Just because
That's okay.
I am. Because I host 2 episodes this week, the Members Midnight Special, as well as our regular public offering. But because I'm kind of in the center square on the Hollywood Squares here, I'll be Paul Lind and defer to somebody else. Stephen Green, do you have any topics to whom you would like to discuss?
Wait a minute. First, I'm going to have to diagram that sentence before I can parse the dang thing. And I hated diagramming sentences.
Future tetralogical tense.
That's the part of English I got an F in. I wish I were kidding. Maybe a D.
It was the past conditional imperfect plus parfait.
Yeah, I like Douglas Adams' joke in one of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy's books, that talking about trying to figure out verb tenses for time travel. And the grammar scholars finally gave up on the future perfect tense because obviously it wasn't. Anyway,
when you get to language class, that really blows you away, like French or Spanish class, and all of a sudden they start going into all these different verb tenses and everything, and I'm like, I've been talking for 14 years, and you're now telling me all of this kind of substructure is underneath the language that I've been using glibly all this time?
That's what I thought. That's why I refused to learn it. We had diagramming sentences, and I'm like, no.
Me fail English? That's impossible.
That's impossible. That's right. Speaking, this is actually a brilliant segue, gentlemen, because speaking of failing English, I want to talk this week about Joe Biden.
All right.
Oh, the poor guy.
Right?
Why, did he do something?
No, Kim Jong-un doesn't like him. Thinks he's an idiot.
Well,
That's a plus.
I was about to say, if anything could get me to vote for the guy, that might be it. No, I want to talk about Joe. He's the front runner according to all the polls. But I came across just a slew of stories. I use Bing News to gather a lot of headlines, I don't use.
Brought to you by Microsoft.
I don't use Google News, even though it's arguably superior, because I don't use any Google products. Period. But you start noticing trends as these news aggregators feed you headlines, and Joe Biden just in the last few days is generating way more news than he was, and none of it is very friendly. And of course, this is coming from the media, which leans fairly left, if you'll indulge me in a little understatement.
Well, for the week or so before that, Steve, it was quite the opposite. It was all, wow, look at Biden, he rules.
Yeah, he's got the 23-point lead over Bernie Sanders. But the stories coming out this week, there was one, New York Magazine, right, which is about as left-wing as you can get, had a headline, Joe Biden's early campaign strategy doesn't involve much campaigning. Politico did something similar. They had one headlined, he's dominating in the polls, his fundraising is going gangbusters, and he's showing broad support from key political players, but has no energetic crowds.
Yes,
Elizabeth
this
Warren.
is exactly what we want.
Elizabeth Warren is outdrawing him in attendance,
Wow.
and Biden apparently is sticking to these smaller venues where the empty seats don't show up. So I want to talk about the inevitable candidate who might not be.
So he's
I
doing the
hope he
smaller
raises
venues.
billions.
Is that kind of like MTV's old show, Joe Biden Unplugged?
You can't take the plugs out without eliminating the whole top part of his scalp.
So I heard NPR talking about this morning, and basically they were saying that that Biden is not getting out very often, but the correspondent must have made 6 different arguments at his own initiative defending why Joe Biden need not get out very often.
Well, and here's the thing: you would think that by limiting the number of places where he's going, he would actually be driving attendance up, because, oh man, I've been waiting all week to see Joe Biden, because he's been like the groundhog on
He may not come to our state again. Yeah.
Exactly, and instead he's not showing up very much, and neither are the crowds.
First prize, a ticket to a Joe Biden rally. Second prize, 4 tickets to a Joe Biden rally.
Third prize, you're fired.
That's right. A set of steak knives. It just doesn't seem. I mean, Donald Trump has changed the whole calculus. Bill used to talk during the campaign of 2016 about how the enthusiasm at the Trump rallies were this incredible phenomenon, and it seems now that's the expected thing. Like, you've got to be able to do that, because we have this tendency to examine the last battle and say, well, whatever seemed to have worked in the last battle
That
is
was
the
the reason
prescription for the next battle.
And you don't want to refight the last war, and I think that's what makes this so interesting. Is are Democrats just kind of resigned to this guy, so they're all going to vote for him in the primary, but they're not thrilled about it, or is he just not the candidate because they're not thrilled about it?
Speaking of not fighting the last war, I was passing a Jeep the other day, and you know how Jeeps have some of them have that tire mounted on the back, and there was a tire cover around it, and I think that the tire cover said something like USA undefeated World War champs. And I was like, I feel bad about laughing at this, but it was funny.
That's great.
They had some magazine had like all the countries in the world ranked as like in a basketball tournament, and the quarterfinals were the United States versus Vietnam and Russia versus Afghanistan, and Vietnam and Afghanistan went to the finals.
Ouch.
Okay, so I should write this down, Steve, because I always forget. So you just said your show.
Joe Biden, the evitable candidate.
Oh, nicely played.
Evitable. Okay.
With a question mark.
Okay, I got to put a big question mark there. Bill, you can dress that up and make it more poetic, can't you?
Yes. I'll use a semicolon.
Whoa.
That is much more poetic. That's a little E.E. Cummings. So, coming right along, Bill, your episode this week on Right Angle is what we're doing now.
Yeah, it just parenthetically just sort of ties in a bit with what Steve was talking about. There have been a couple of elections around the world that have been better than expected for conservatives. Trump's, needless to say, his win here was simply incredible. There are something like 17 or 18 models that currently predicting Donald Trump winning and no one else winning in 2020, but don't get cocky, kid.
Yeah.
But as usual, Richard the Cat, Richard Fernandez, who's just incredible. Is it Fernandez or Rodriguez? It's Fernandez.
Fernandez, yeah.
Yeah. He put it. He got it all in a tweet, and this is what I'd like to talk about. He says the current tide of political upheaval is basically rejectionist. It's a backlash against the 20th century nihilist project. It's necessary but insufficient. The harder part, which comes next, is building a successor to the ruins of 20th century ideology, and that's kind of what I want to talk about, because we've been doing this show for 10, 11 years now, in one version or another, and we've always been fighting rearguard actions. And always been trying to tell people why this whole socialism scam is so terrible and deadly. But I do not at any time remember advancing a competing idea and making it sound like something you wanted to be a part of. I mean, this idea of conservatism, standing athwart the rail of history or whatever, shouting stop. Was it Buckley who said that, or something?
Yeah, that was the National Review's original motto.
Yeah. So that's still a negative proposition, and I have thought for quite a long time that, well, first of all, the whole Republican-Democrat divide is not the divide that people have these days. It's much more of a progressive conservative divide. There are a lot of people who vote Democrat who should be voting conservative if you say blue team, red team for whatever reason. So there's that. But the one thing that I'm most struck by about this is this idea that the progressives are still using terminology that was invented by Karl Marx in the middle of not the last century, the century before that, in very early stages of capitalism, which he named, and he basically defined these classes, set up the whole thing. People are still mimicking this nonsense when it's just simply not so. We were talking about that on one of the shows. It's like, if you think conditions in a coal mine in Wigan, England, were awful, just wait till you see the conditions that they've got graphic designers working under in Santa Monica. To just break your heart. And so this whole idea of the proletariat and the bourgeoisie and the fat cat with the big bags of money with a dollar sign printed on it and all of this stuff is obsolete. And it seems that the people of the world have had enough of it. They're starting to really understand that the left is not just interested in politics, that they're going to follow you everywhere. Like,
How much of this, Bill, do you think is due to reactions against unfettered immigration in some of these countries that are? It seems, and frankly, let's just speak it boldly. It seems like a number of these countries that are turning to a more kind of rejectionist philosophy, as you're saying, are really just sick of the Muslim influx into their countries.
I don't think
question.
It's certain. Look, that is certainly what has reached. That is certainly what it's taken to shock a European out of being a socialist. But I think that's a symptom. The cause is that their governments will not listen to them, and that their governments will tell them what they will believe. And this is what we're going to do. And not only will you take it, you're going to like it. And if you say anything bad about it, we're going to bring the law down on your head. And Merkel said a couple years ago, here's how many immigrants we're going to bring in from Northern Africa and so on. And if you have a problem with that, then you're not a German and get out of Germany, which is an interesting thing to say.
You don't think it's a kind of racism or bigotry or jingoism that's happening?
I think it's a reaction to everything being racism, jingoism, and bigotry. I think it's a reaction to that, to the idea that there is no thought that you can have that is not demonized. And I really think we're seeing. Look, it's, Churchill famously said, this isn't the beginning of the end, but at least it's the end of the beginning. I think it's the beginning of the end for progressivism. The philosophy cannot survive. It just can't do it. And this is my entire thesis of my video game idea, is that you can't beat the biology out of people, that young males are still playing video games and blowing things up and driving fast and shooting guns and making money. And that no matter how hard the left tries, their philosophy is fundamentally anti-human. Not just anti-human behavior, but anti-human species. World's going to die in 10 years because of us, and if we don't do something now, and we've got to, and we're a cancer on society, and why bring kids into this world, and all of this stuff, all of it. I think people have I think it's gotten so thick for so long that the fundamental core humanity of people is reasserting itself in a rebellion against this kind of top-down, here's what's good for you.
Yeah, and Scott, if whatever label, even a pejorative label you might want to put on there, jingoism or nationalism or whatever, it's a natural human reaction to being told that, number one, we can't impose our culture on other people's, and number two, we're going to invite a lot of people of a different culture in to impose their culture on us, and you have to shut up about it.
Well said. Yeah.
By the way, Bill, I met a couple the other day in the conduct of my other business.
You're in Texas, right? So you meant to say business, didn't you?
That's right.
Business. It was a lovely couple, very smart, handsome people, and they, during the course of our conversation, mentioned that they're among those people who don't want to bring any more offspring into this already beleaguered world, and I literally said to them, I said, you're the kind of people who should be bringing children into this world. It's like, you are great people. You should be having as many children as you possibly can. And they're like, no, we wouldn't want to burden the world with that. And I didn't want to tell them, it's like, if you don't, somebody will, and if we can't drive them out.
But that's an interesting point. It'd be great if you bring that up or if it comes up, because this whole idea of this beleaguered world, the world has not been this clean for 300 years. And we have more oil available to us now than we had when the first well went down in Pennsylvania in
170 years ago, 160 years ago.
We can get to more oil now than we've ever been able to get to because of technology. The planet's getting cleaner. It's getting greener, too, as the CO2 levels rise somewhat microscopically. Beachfront property is still beachfront property. And there's been no major civilizational wars since the invention of the atomic bomb, which I do not ascribe to coincidence, by the way. And life has never been better. when you're not, if you decide to bring a child into this world, you're not going to lose him to dropsy, or to scurvy or
polio. Geez, I mean, we only
polio.
It's not even been 100 years since we
diphtheria.
knocked that out.
There's never been a better time to bring children into a world, ever, ever, ever.
Alrighty, so I wrote that down. What's that?
Top that if you can.
I cannot.
All right.
And so I'm going to do these topics instead.
Excellent.
Okay. Preemptory surrender. That's my strategy for every conflict.
So our old buddy Mark Cuban, owner of the Dallas Mavericks, as well as a star of Shark Tank on TV, billionaire that he is, has an idea to change the Second Amendment in ways that people, and by people I mean us, wouldn't expect. And so here's the thrust of the idea. Have you guys already heard this yet?
This is complete news to me.
Okay, so here's what his proposal is. First of all, the Second Amendment should, what's that?
I hate it.
Okay. First of all, the Second Amendment should ensure that Americans can own firearms without running the risk that the government will seize their weapons, okay? Every American, he says, has the right to own a gun. Number two, the federal government will never be allowed to confiscate that gun from an individual. So far,
we got the Second Amendment. I'm listening.
Yeah.
so far we're doing okay. Now, watch this little
Prestidigitation.
yes, that's the word. The little turn here. It's an interesting turn, though, because he's now about to grab a hold of another conservative concept, and that is states' rights. States should have wide latitude to determine gun policy within their borders. The state, if a state like Texas wants to allow open carry, so be it. If Pennsylvania wants to be much more stringent and limit the way who can own guns and how they purchase them and what they can consist of, that's fine with them too. That's fine with him too, because we're going to give the states the ability to regulate that.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
How we doing
I
so
wish
far?
I wish I'd been there, man. I wish I'd been there, because if I'd been there listening to this, I would have said, okay, so got it. So can you give me an example of how my First Amendment rights might be different in Texas than they would be in California, for example?
yeah,
Not my Second Amendment rights, my First Amendment rights.
well, he's saying
I
you
think
can
the
abolish-
states should be allowed
how would the
wide
standards
latitude
of-
in interpreting the 13th Amendment.
Seriously though, what would my freedom of speech restrictions look like in a state that had those restrictions?
See, I don't think that's what he's saying.
No, but that is exactly what he's saying. That's exactly what he's saying, and that's why you can defeat it with one sentence. It's like the Bill of Rights are not up for discussion. You don't. The Bill of Rights are the Bill of Rights are the morality clause to the structure of the federal government. And this is one of those few laws that are federal. In fact, everything that's federal is in the Constitution, as far as I'm concerned. It's in there. It applies to all the states. You were
Well,
aware
there were a lot of Federalists who didn't think we should have even done a Bill of Rights
Well,
because
we did.
it implied that the
I
government
understand.
needed to grant us permission to have rights.
Well, that's why the Bill of Rights was written in the form that it was, which is not to say we give you this right, to say that we can't take it away from you. But with that said, it's the moral justification for the Constitution at a federal level, and to take away the federal level from this argument is, we know what it is. Yeah. And so, sorry, no.
Well, I think this will be an interesting conversation, because this is the first thing I have heard from anybody that basically wasn't the same argument over and over and over again. So he is basically, and by the way, he was a big supporter of Hillary Clinton. He's often bandied about as a possible presidential candidate himself.
Liberal.
Yes. But he's also a big capitalist who owns a basketball team. And
when he says that no one can take, everyone has a right to own a gun, and the government cannot take your guns away.
The federal government.
What?
Well, see, yeah, the word federal should be in there, but the reporter
So
did not insert
how would
it.
a state restrict that if they weren't going to be in violation of the first two clauses? And if that's the case, then why even have the third clause?
So basically saying if your gun's going to be confiscated, it won't be by federal agents.
By state agents.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's still kind of the government, isn't it?
It is kind of the government, but I think it is a distinction with a difference, in the sense that he's basically guaranteeing that the federal government will have nothing to do with your right to keep and bear arms.
But my right to keep and bear arms has nothing to do with the federal government, and it is enshrined in the federal Constitution that the government shall have no right to infringe upon these privileges and rights for that matter. So your argument
and it's also enshrined within the Constitution that you may amend the Constitution.
Yes.
Now that's an entirely different story, and
that's what he's saying. He's not saying pass a law to make this happen. He's saying we should amend the Constitution.
That's fine. And my response to that would be, if you're saying that I can own a gun, and if you're saying that the government can't take the gun away, then what the hell do we need the third clause of this for? Because we already have these two protections in the Second Amendment. You're obviously empowering somebody to take the guns away, or else there wouldn't be an amendment to the amendment.
Yeah, as long as we're talking amendments, it's an involved process, and I'd like to start that process requiring that the entire nation must wear party hats each year on my birthday. And we'll see which one gets further.
It's got a better chance of passing than repealing the Second Amendment.
Underwear shall now be worn on the outside. Okay, so
that's going to be a vigorous argument. Good.
This should be fun. Okay, so that was one. And then this one, I wish I could remember the name of our member at billwhittle.com who suggested this topic. And
we're down to one member?
Even sent me, the member. Yeah, do you ever hear people use that expression? They'll go, usually it's younger people, but somebody will say, hey, I had this one friend. And I'm like,
wow,
just one?
Kind of lonely.
Anyway, so in Georgia, Governor Brian Kemp recently signed into law some legislation that is going to change the nature of healthcare in the what is that called? The peach cobbler state. Mm-hmm. They are going to actually make it possible for doctors and patients to enter into direct primary care agreements, they're called, where basically the patient pays the doctor a fee each month to provide a range of services. This has been done before. I think Michigan was the other state that has done this so far. The upshot of it is, because it's not going to be considered insurance, all the regulations and restrictions that are tied up in the whole health insurance industry will be stripped away. So basically, you don't need to have all the certificate of authority and license from the state to have a medical practice. You just have to have a medical license.
This is brilliant. This is the hope of the future.
Yeah.
So flat fee, and by the way, they're seeing according to the advocates of this kind of legislation, they basically say it's Marcus Welby with an iPhone, and that doctors
Love it.
are spending more time with individual patients. That the lack of insurance involvement in the medical practice actually takes it the staff in a doctor's office. He can get by with like one full-time employee for every 2 doctors, while the other practices that deal with insurance have 7 employees per doctor.
Oh, what a waste!
This is the future. This is absolutely the future.
That is,
and so
tail to tooth ratio.
So you're paying actual insurance to a doctor for him to cover virtually anything that can happen to you that does not require an extended hospital stay. And then what you do is you go buy what's it called, stop loss insurance for those exceedingly unusual cases where something major happens to you. You get hit by a bus or something. Here's $200,000 or $300,000 or whatever to pay the hospital bills and stuff. Love it. Yeah. Brilliant.
More like this.
And they're saying that basically appointments last longer. It's and
personal care, and there
are innovations.
Yeah,
like
and they want to build a relationship with you because you're paying them in person and they know you and just like the olden days.
So, anyway,
fun.
We can do one that will be intense, and then we can do this one that will be joyful and cheerful and fun.
Give people whiplash.
Your boy's knee is fine, Mrs. Evans. He just twisted it falling off of his bicycle, but we should take him down to Washington to have an MRI, and we will probably have to preemptively amputate because of the legal possibilities. But nevertheless, I still think his knee is fine.
Well, and doctors can do other things. For example, under these direct care agreements, without additional fees, they can do stitches, biopsies, joint injections, ultrasounds, bone scans, lung scans,
deliver medical care.
No, real men do their own stitches.
And minor surgeries.
Deliver medical care.
Yeah, imagine that. Anyway, speaking of which, this is unrelated. I just noticed, Bill, this morning, on average, our YouTube channel gets something like 600 some thousand views per month, okay, on YouTube. I just noticed this morning that we are up over 800,000 views per month. In fact, if I recall correctly, it was in the neighborhood of 850,000.
Wow, we still got a couple days to go.
I attribute this. Yeah, well, and it's a rolling 28-day month.
Okay.
So it's not like the calendar month. It's just in the last 28 days. It's kind of like a lunar month or whatever. But anyway, I just thought our members are the engines of this growth. These are the people who are sharing this content with other people. And then those folks find out about it and they tell two friends and so on and so on and so on.
I'm serious as I can be. I do know what's causing this. I do know what's responsible for this growth, and the answer is Scott Ott. And
it's
that's
the hair.
It's Scott Ott. It's Scott Ott 100%.
I would take my hat
all
off.
of the work he did on the website, all of the work he did with customer service. Shelley here is terrific, but the whole website design, Scott Ott. And
I rarely disagree with Bill Whittle, but this is one of those occasions.
I wouldn't if I were you.
In any case, yeah, that's right. And that guy who I just said
we were asking about, like, I usually do the thumbnails because I like to just put something kind of stupid and artistic on them. And since I do them, they're always late. And one of them was very late, and I had to write to Scott and our editor Mark and say, I'm sorry, they should have been here Friday, but they weren't because Bill. Anyway, no, it's great news. That's a significant increase.
And by the way, minutes viewed is way up as well. Because they track how many minutes are viewed. Subscribers way up as well. I think we're up something like 8,000 subscribers since January or something. Or not? 8,000.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're up like 8,000 subscribers since January on a regular, like every 28 days. We are up like 3,000 some subscribers since the previous 28 days.
That's
thanks to
this is where we can really start to slack off then, right?
Now we can relax. That's it.
Exactly my point. But and thanks to YouTube's algorithm and their concern for that free speech be promulgated and excuse me.
Yeah.
Our subscriber, what do they call that? Our monetization hasn't grown
at all
in concert with the number of minutes viewed or the number of views. The monetization levels have remained relatively stable despite the rapid growth.
Meager is the adjective you're looking for.
Meager and stable.
That's all right.
But anyway,
that's all right. It's like, seriously, it's part of the thing I was talking about earlier. It's like, what are you guys so afraid of? What are you so afraid of?
I just saw a thing, I can't remember where, it was over the weekend, that said YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter were going to merge into a new social media conglomerate called UTwitface.
Epic.
That's awesome. So anyway, so the whole point of that was to thank the members at BillWhittle.com for sharing this and for creating that magnificent blog that they maintain on the website. Things are going to continue to improve, and there will be new features unveiled within the next few months, weeks. I'm not sure. I'm going to say months, and then try to surprise you by making it less than that.
Because Bill,
I guess that won't be a
under
surprise
promise,
now.
Over deliver every time.
That's right. It's too late. I just
wait a minute. Hold on a sec. Under promise and over deliver.
Have you been getting it wrong all these years? You've been doing it the other way around.
Have I got it backwards?
Yeah, sorry.
See, I've been over-promising and under-delivering.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, now I feel
that way it leads heartbreak and of psoriasis, I guess.
Every last one of our members who signs up in the next 24 hours will get a giant inflatable elephant on their front yard, signed by Bill Whittle. I just thought of that now.
Offer not available in Alaska, Arizona, Alabama, Connecticut, Delaware, Florida, Georgia,
Alabama, Alaska,
Hawaii,
Arizona, Arkansas, California, Colorado,
Indiana, Iowa.
Can we just say states of the union?
That's right.
We just say unavailable.
Some assembly required,
unavailable.
batteries not included. Your mileage may vary. Malibu can not included.
Close course, professional driver.
That's So you don't forget, call before midnight tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this raucous Backstage episode of, what do we call this again? We call this Right Angle Backstage.
Yeah. Doggone it.
And we are going to get about changing our shirts and shooting this week's episodes of the show. And by the way, I'm in this new studio now. We moved to a different house a few miles to the west in Texas, and same latitude, but closer to the lake.
Oh,
and nice. I usually have to jack the air conditioner way down to maintain a reasonable body temperature in the studio. I am freezing to death right now.
That's good news. It's cooler
Deep in
where
the
you are.
heart of Texas. Excellent.
Well, I think it's just that this house has insulation.
Ah.
I think. But I am sitting here like I have goosebumps.
I have
and
to.
it's not because I'm in the presence of Stephen Green anymore.
I'm not joking about. I'm not joking about. I'm going to have to seriously going to have to do a firewall about American air conditioning, because there's air conditioning and then there's American air conditioning, and in American air conditioning, which I experienced in Guantanamo Bay, for example, you walk into a building that has American air conditioning, and you go from like 99 degrees, 99% humidity to your breath in front of your face. And it is like the greatest feeling in the world, American air conditioning. And only Americans
Oh,
can do that.
European
American
air
cars,
conditioning stirs the air around somewhat.
yeah.
Every woman in Texas carries a sweater in her car.
Well, exactly. In my car, you could either make ice in my car with the air conditioner, or you could barbecue ribs with the heater. I'm telling you, it's the way to go, man.
Yeah. And you know what Texas would be if it weren't for air conditioning?
Uninhabited.
Mexico.
I'm sure that's racist somehow.
Did you just come
All
up
right,
with that?
ladies and gentlemen. What's that?
Is that did you just come up with that?
As far as I
was
know.
quite
Oh,
good.
no, I just came up with it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. That's excellent. No, that's actually brilliant, Scotty. Texas for that.
Feel free to use that
This makes-
with proper credit, of course. 2019, Scott Ott, copyright. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this episode of Right Angle Backstage. Thanks to the members for making it possible. If you have a beloved friend who has not yet become a member at BillWhittle.com, just bring them to this website. Step back a little bit and watch the joy roll across their face, and then show them where that become a member button is.
And this
We
is the only
appreciate-
this is the only place where we are in full agreement with the progressives, and that is that if you have any deceased relatives who'd like to become regular monthly paying members, we'd be happy to accept them as well. We do not discriminate against people who are non-living.
We have no knowledge of whether or not all our members can fog a mirror.
And we would like to keep it that way.
At least they cast a reflection, as opposed to as opposed to the Young Turks membership.
Oh, man.
All righty.
Beautiful.
That's it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.